You are listening to the Star Lores Podcast.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
Are you stuck-up, half-witted, scruffy-looking nerf herder?
But I was going into Toshi Station to pick up some power converters.
Xenopaleobiology. Until more research, like the sort undertaken by myself, comes to light, the galaxy will have to continue living in the shroud of ignorance when it comes to these remarkable species. Obo Rin, in a report to Major Vonten. The galaxy is an ancient place. The sentient beings who populate it tell stories that are tens of thousands of years old. But there's a history far deeper. Life's biography is written by the science of paleobiology, which in the galactic context, of course, acquires the obligate xeno suffix. Paleobiology itself is a multidisciplinary field that draws heavily on biology, geology, and planetary sciences, among others. Xenopaleobiology is a crucial frame of reference for understanding the life that thrives and dies across the interconnected and interdependent galactic ecosystem. Obo Rin, the infamous imperial sentientologist, is perhaps best known for his propagandistic, xenophobic, and speciesist conclusions reached while working under the direct oversight of men such as Darth Vader. But even a broken chronometer is right twice a day. His greatest contribution to legitimate science is his universal definition of life. Under this rubric, to qualify as living, a being, quote, must be organized into a distinct morphological structure, respond to stimuli in its environment, metabolize fuel to provide energy, reproduce themselves, and adapt to changes in its environment via evolution, unquote. It is evidence regarding these features that the xenopaleobiologist attempts to collect about ancient life. The Scouring of Paradise. Although it is statistically not much more likely than 1 billion other worlds to be the first planet to support life, Goroth Prime has a deep paleo record. Native scientists there estimated that about 5 billion years before the rise of the Galactic Empire, life first emerged on Goroth Prime. Goroth's modern environment hardly looks hospitable. Geologically, most of the surface is covered with evidence of relatively recent volcanic activity. This belies an important point about xenobiology. It is a well-regarded hypothesis that early life on many worlds may have been extremophilic. Extremophilic organisms could be the crabs that live at the bottom of some oceans near volcanic vents, where the local temperature reaches hellish degrees. Such organisms may represent some of the first on many worlds, especially given the fact that volcanism is more prevalent on young worlds. Sentient life on Goroth Prime appeared relatively late, with the first noted exemplar species being represented by modern Gorothites from 1 million BBY on. Civilization on the world did not emerge until 10,000 BBY, which is quite late for the galactic community. Due to Goroth's unique astrographical position and elemental composition, traveling to and from the world has long been a great technical challenge for most spacers. Despite this, the Galactic Empire did make the dangerous journey to the world, and annexed it as part of a general campaign of territorial expansion they were conducting across the galaxy. The world had a high percentage of a rare element called hyperbaride, which generates disproportionately large mass shadows in hyperspace. Until relatively recently, Goroth's ecosystem was entirely separated from that which has otherwise been spreading across the galaxy for tens of thousands of years via hyperspace travel. With civilization still in its fledgling states, Goroth Prime was thrust into a relationship with the wider galaxy in 8000 BBY. Daring smugglers from Corellia successfully navigated through opaque nebulae and poor hyperspace conditions and discovered the Virgin Planet. The Gorothites traded some of their more useless rocks for technological wonders from spacers. Of course, from the Corellian point of view, they had traded useless baubles and trinkets for a fortune in precious stones and minerals. Shortly after first contact, Goroth Prime touched base with the Galactic Republic's Bureau of Acculturation and applied for membership. This could be an incredibly long process, and in Goroth's case, it took 5 centuries. By 4000 BBY, much of Goroth Prime's local space, the transnebular sector, had been colonized. Transnebular settlers generally came from 2 very distinct species and cultures, the Aquilish and the Corellians. It wasn't long before a sectoral war erupted between these foreign groups, with the local Gorothites caught in the middle. They retained neutrality throughout the conflict, however, a fact which, given their world's key strategic position, frustrated both sides. Eventually, one of the combatants decided that it was better to take the peaceful world out of the equation than risk it ever falling to enemy hands. A meteor shower was engineered to collide with the planet. Over a period of 16 hours, rocks from outer space smashed the surface, killing the vast majority of the 5 billion Gorothites living there. This constituted a phenomenon which occurs with stark regularity on many planets across geologic timescales, a mass extinction event. The Gorothites may have just barely survived, but given the devastation caused by all of the asteroid's impact, many other species were not so resilient. The meteorite bombardment also liberated huge quantities of hyperbaride into the atmosphere and the rest of the Goroth system. The mass shadows generated by these heavy elements has made jumping out of hyperspace in the vicinity of the world particularly hazardous and prone to accidents. Of course, difficult is not always the same as impossible, and some pilots are more than willing to put their skills to the test and to try to navigate around the hulking mass shadows. Although this can disable the ship, for the average sensible pilot who pays attention to the odds, they must leave hyperspace at a considerable distance from Goroth Prime and make the rest of the journey at sublight speeds. This journey can take weeks. Asteroid impacts as a natural phenomenon are responsible for many extinction events across the galaxy. Other natural hazards to the survival of species include supernovae and related phenomenon, and gamma ray bursts. Equally dangerous as the cold and uncaring universe are the sentient beings. To call the Corellian-Aquilish War a near miss is an understatement. The Gorothite species came closer than most sentient species have in recent memory to extinction. As tragic as Gorothite extinction would have been, it wouldn't have been unique in the context of paleobiology. Other species would have quickly filled the niche they left behind, and in enough time, new species would have evolved, specifically because of the Gorothite's absence. Perhaps the only theory in biology with more supporting evidence than evolution by natural selection is this: all beings die, and all species go extinct. Void of death. It is the great paradox of existence that we must live so that all others die. Quote, Anonymous Charon Bioscientist. Translated from Charon.
When sentient life was just emerging on Goroth Prime, it was going extinct on Geralek. The native sentients, an aquatic species, built cities at the bottom of Geralek's beautiful oceans. While occupied by the Galactic Empire, their infamous xenoanthropologists did not think of full exploration of the forgotten cities or a catalog of the extinct sentients worth their time. There are urban myths of these mysterious beings surfacing somewhere in the galaxy, of technological wonders in their ancient cities, and a deep connection to the Force. But sadly, there is little empirical data to speak of. Organizations like the O'Broen Institute of Archaeology organize and sponsor expeditions to frontier worlds to discover and catalog sentient life forms. Perhaps someday the Institute's researchers will visit Geralek and learn what happened to its extinct native population. Archaeologists from the Institute were dispatched to Brath Kella to investigate the apparent extinction of the Kella species. In 120 BBY, most life was cleansed from the world by massive impacts from space. The orbits of Brath Kella's moons were unstable, and it was only a matter of time before they crashed into the planet. In earlier phases of a planet's life, such collisions can actually make life more likely to occur, but usually when it happens before much biology has had a chance to establish itself. Such large impacts can in some cases lead to the creation of moons, which in turn have effects on a planet's magnetosphere, rotation, and tides, all of which have a profound influence on the life of a world. Brath Kella had 3 large moons. Under normal circumstances, these would have been a great protector of their parent planets. On Brath, however, the unstable orbit of its satellites and their eventual collision with the world are what caused the extinction event. Some asteroids or planets are thought to contain organic molecules conducive to life, or even fully developed, single-celled and microscopic organisms. When these wanderers through the cosmos splash down on a world, their organic material gets a chance to establish itself on the planet, a hypothesis known as panspermia. Additionally, large impacts in one star system can on occasion jettison materials from one planetary neighbor to another, and in the process, possibly exchange living organisms. After the bombardment, a kind of nuclear winter set in on Brath Kella. huge amounts of particulate matter was sent high into the atmosphere, which blocked out most of the light from its sun and initiated an ice age. 2 O'Brien archaeologists died on their expedition here, on one of the many glaciers that had grown to cover the planet's surface after the impact event. Their skeletons were deposited into the fossil record, as it were, and preserved in terrific condition in that cold and relatively antiseptic environment. The arid planet of Geonosis suffered from a similar extinction event. An asteroid bombardment killed 99% of life on the world. Among the tenacious, or else incredibly lucky, surviving species were the ancestors of modern Geonosians. Conditions on the post-impact world were unforgiving. Those who survived had to be aggressive, ruthless, and efficient. These traits, combined with their hypersociality and ability to maintain enormous populations and hives, are what allowed the Geonosians to eventually dominate their brutal world. Sometimes, the existential threats to life on a planet originate closer to home, from species that evolved on those planets. The Bith of Clacdor 7 shared a certain intellectual sophistication and technical aptitude with their system neighbors, the ancient and advanced Kalumai. Bith also share morphological characteristics with the Kalumai, such as their massive craniums and slender bodies. While the Kalumai managed to live together in apparent harmonious and blissful synthesis with their technology, the Bith suffered from growing pains, to put it mildly, with their creations. During a massive planetary war, chemical weapons were used to annihilate the capital city of Nojo. The result was a near complete erasure of all life on Clacdor 7. Even in the face of such destruction, however, life finds a way. The attack left sufficient survivors for a viable population of Bith to carry on. And due to the effects of the weapons, they soon evolved into the Ibith subspecies. Bith culture's present pacifism and focus on arts and culture are a direct result of this cataclysm. The causes of extinction events on a given world can come from a third source as well. And it is this kind that may be the most troublesome to the curious Xenopaleobiologist. Sentient beings and their starships can also cause the extinction of innumerable species. The destruction of Alderaan, the crimes of Kip-Duran, and the untold savagery of Revan and Malak's Sith Empire are of course greatly detailed by historians of warfare, and need only a passing mention of how much they degraded the galaxy's biodiversity. Abeloth, best known as a malevolent and violent deity, is also thought to be the ancestor of the humanoid Cathol species. Not unlike their matriarch, the Cathol demonstrated a remarkable ability to control life, and developed advanced biotechnology on par with the Yuuzhan Vong. Their architecture, their ships, and their hyperspace technology were all grown. To aid them, the Cathol also genetically engineered a number of vassal species to do their bidding. When the Cathol Rift disaster occurred, the Cathol turned themselves into a nebulous form of energy and stored their life essence in a place called the Life Well. This energy interacted in a not well understood manner with the ambient midi-chlorians on the world, which led to all beings living there having a kind of idiosyncratic force sensitivity. One of their client races, the arachnoid Char-Onti, were all in space aboard bioships during the Cathol Rift disaster. It caused a tear in space-time, and the entire Char-Onti species was trapped in a strange dimension called other space. Perhaps a bug or a feature depending on one's point of view, genetic mutations occurred at a far greater rate than most species in the Char. Within a few centuries, their population had completely speciated into the Charon. These arachnoids were somewhat more violent and pessimistic than their predecessors, considering their rapid mutation rate to be indicative of degeneration and their eventual doom. Eventually, they developed a religion called the Cult of the Void, which sought to erase all life in other space, starting with non-believers. They waged a merciless war of genocide across other space, but thankfully have yet to develop hyperspace capabilities or a reliable method of traveling back to real space.
And now, a word from our sponsors.
When the hyperlane diverges, a true spacer goes right down the middle. The Corellian Engineering Corporation HWK 290 light freighter is equipped to take on punishing atmospheric conditions that would be off limits to a conventional light freighter. Next generation quad laser cannons and blaster cannon are the heaviest weapons ever on a Hawk series freighter. The internal navigation system can take you and your cargo from one end of the galaxy to the next, safely and on time.
Bones.
I will flay your skin from your pathetic bones.
Emperor Palpatine.
Bones, made primarily from calcium carbonate and other elements, are a fairly ubiquitous trait across the galactic biome. They are a structure that have proved their utility for large animals in standard gravity environments, as they appear to have evolved independently on countless worlds. They can protect vital organs, like the skull and rib cage, be used as weapons in the case of some exotic reptiles, and once liberated from their original body, are often used as tools by pre-industrial cultures. The similarity of skeletal structures across so many tetrapod animals in the galaxy could be indicative of a shared genetic ancestry. On the other hand, such shared characteristics could be a phenomenon called convergent evolution, wherein animals develop similar biological adaptations for similar niches, but using independent genetic mechanisms. Aside from being useful for the being who has a skeleton, bones are an excellent source of fossils for Xenopaleobiology, and are well represented in the fossil record. Arthropods and insectoid species with exoskeletons constructed primarily from chitin also make frequent appearances in the fossil record. The Witch of Endor.
The Ewok culture and species was thrust into the galactic limelight when, in 4 ABY, they allied with the Rebel Alliance and fought a land battle against the superior military might of the Galactic Empire. Though diminutive in comparison to many other anthropoids, these pygmy ursine sentients were more than capable warriors. They exhibit a trait called neoteny, wherein over time there are selection pressures towards beings retaining their juvenile traits into adulthood. A similar phenomenon has happened on many worlds, for example with dogs, which are wolves that have had selection pressure towards retaining their puppy traits, such as floppy ears and relatively low levels of aggression into adulthood. Humans, too, are thought to be neotenous apes. Compared to other species in their taxonomic family, adult humans display a markedly immature phenotype. They have very little fur compared to their cousins in the hominid family, undeveloped canine teeth, and the relative distribution and density of their musculature is also closer to the juvenile forms of their relatives. In the case of Ewoks, one can only imagine that their ancestral species could be something akin to a doe mere bear from the world of Neftali, rather than the huggable creatures populating treetop houses in Bright Tree Village. Like so many anthropoid species before them, Ewoks demonstrated that a being's body need not be robust to kill at the Battle of Endor. The shaman of the Bright Tree Ewoks exemplified the darker side of his fuzzy species. Logray the shaman learned his craft from a knowledger practitioner of the dark side of the Force, who had been marooned on his idyllic world. The spiritual craft he returned to Bright Tree Village with after his tutelage came to be known as dark rituals. The rituals required certain morbid aesthetics, and so Logray was seldom seen without his avian skull hat and a staff with the spinal bones of a defeated adversary fastened to it. Logray was hardly unique in his use of bones for ritual purposes. On distant Kashyyyk, for example, Wookiees traditionally used a bone from a tyrossum to determine speaking order at community gatherings. On Dathomir, high-ranking Night Sisters wore elaborate headdresses festooned with bones. After becoming the shaman of Bright Tree Village, Logray busied himself with studying holy texts written in the Ewok language, Ewokese. One of these, the Scroll of Mantrigue, contained a prophecy about a golden deity for whom sacrifice would be required when he visited the Ewoks. It was for this reason that the heroes of Yavin were nearly ritually sacrificed to the Golden One at Logray's command. After being dissuaded from their violent course of action, the Bright Tree Ewoks banished Logray and struck his name from the record, having grown weary of his moribund dark rituals. Over the course of history, many ships have been marooned on the forest moon. It hosted populations of animals from many other worlds, such as tree goats, teaks, and gopins. Even though it didn't really enter the galactic community until the late stages of the Galactic Civil War, it had already been part of the galactic ecosystem for millennia. Ewokese is also definitively in the same language family as the languages spoken by other furry Endorian anthropoids, like the Yuzem or the Duloks. In addition to being the birthplace of an impressive 4 very distinct sentient species, Endor had a variety of native animals. of near sentience. Invasive species were commonplace on Endor, but its ecosystem was remarkably resilient. Despite a statistically abnormal amount of starships crash landing and spreading their flora, fauna, and fungi around on the planet, its ecosystem accommodates invasive species amazingly well.
Fossils. When most organisms die, their remains are consumed as energy to fuel other life forms in their local ecosystem. Flesh is eaten by scavengers, and soft tissues are decomposed by bacteria and fungi. Within a brief period, no trace of their existence remains aside from their progeny, should they have been fortunate to reproduce before death. But sometimes remains or traces of remains are preserved by geological forces. When sediment in the form of sand, dirt, tar, and even lava cover the dead body of an organism, there is a chance that some trace of it will be preserved. After 10,000 galactic standard years, these remains are called fossils by paleontologists. Leaves, pollen, bacteria, and of course bones of large animals are all counted among the fossil record. The planet Noe-Haon in the expansion region is well known for its fossil beds. In 3630 BBY, a researcher of uncertain affiliation named Scatheris made an extensive study of the world's paleontological riches, focusing particularly on the fearsome chlor slug. Slug is a rather misleading name, as the creatures more closely resemble a leech in terms of circular, toothy maw, and a centipede with vicious blades for legs. Chlor slugs have been immortalized as game pieces in the wildly popular holographic game of strategy, Dejarik. Invertebrates, perhaps smaller than the insectoid Noehans, are often preserved in the fossil record via amber, the sap from trees. When a small insect has the misfortune of being deluged by the viscous fluid, and it is covered in sediment, the bug can enter the venerable fossil record. Elsewhere in the galaxy, the minerals that constitute certain kinds of fossils, such as exonium, can be burned for starship fuel, as a sonic weapon energy source, and can be used as a food additive. This valuable teal-colored resource brought the armies of the Republic and the CIS into direct conflict on the world where it occurs, Rishi. The tropical world contains many species of interest to the xenobiologically inclined, such as the wampa subspecies known as the swamp wampa, and the Kel dragon, a relative of Tatooine's infamous Krayt dragon. Kels, like a handful of other species, are distributed widely throughout the galaxy. It is thought that ancient Sith may have been responsible for introducing them to worlds like Rusan. Living fossils.
The concept of living fossils is often thrown around in popular discourse about relic populations of animals. For example, the coelacanth fish or crocodilian animals are frequently given the living fossil moniker due to their phenotypic similarity to ancient species. Such living fossils are often as distinct from their ancient lookalikes as any two species within the same genus, genetically speaking. In the Clone Wars, an awesome exception to this was noted, and a living fossil did indeed appear. The Dugs of Malastare are a fierce, proud, and capable culture. They have a rich hunting tradition and were quite adept at taking down megafauna, a feat all the more impressive considering the Dugs' relative smallness. They had to develop these skills in order to escape the apex predators of an ancient Malastare. The largest animals they ever took down were the quadrupedal reptilian zillobeasts. These colossal animals reached an adult size of up to about 100 meters and had the carnivorous appetite one would expect from an animal of that size. Other notable morphological features included a fifth limb extending from their back, which was in all respects the same as their arms and legs. Amazingly, the Dugs hunted them to extinction, or so they thought. For most of Malastare's recent history, the Zillos were believed extinct. That is until the Grand Army of the Republic deployed an anti-droid superweapon against the CIA's invasion force on Malastare. The weapon worked wonderfully in terms of turning the battle in the Republic's favor. However, it awakened an enemy far more deadly. Zillos, apparently, have an incredible ability to hibernate. While in this state of suspended animation, their metabolism is slowed to such a degree that they require no food for millennia on end. In general, the larger the animal, the less proportionate amount of energy it needs to consume. For example, a hummingbird may need to consume its entire body weight worth of nectar every day, while a zillobeast would only need to eat a few hundred dugs, the body mass proportion equivalent, perhaps, to a Caesar salad for anthropoids. The Dugs of old had long believed that one day the zillobeasts that preyed on their ancestors would return to destroy Malastaran civilization. They codified, recorded, and preserved the methods used in the past to slay the beasts. However, Republic forces used their own techniques to subdue it. Supreme Chancellor Palpatine realized the scientific importance of such a creature and had it anesthetized and transported to Coruscant for future study. However, containing an animal of that size and intelligence turned out to be a task too difficult for its captors. The zillobeast escaped its confinement on Coruscant and wreaked no small amount of havoc on the population center before being killed by Republic forces. However, Palpatine gave the order to his scientists to collect DNA samples from the corpse for cloning. Although its species is not well described or understood by xenobiologists, the living world Xenoma Seacut can perhaps be considered a living fossil. Its progenitor has been dead for millions of years, and as far as anyone knows, Seacut is the last of its kind. But of course, it stretches the definition of fossil somewhat. What category the incredibly fast bioships it produced until the Clone Wars belonged to is a debate best left to professional xenobiologists. Another interesting case is the bioship called the Telyakon Vagabond. It was created by the Kella species and used as a kind of ark to escape the deluge that destroyed so much life on their homeworld. The intrepid Lando Calrissian boarded the ship and, along with C-3PO, learned much about it and its purpose of restoring biodiversity on Brathkella.
Thanks for flying with us. Jordan here. Just wanted to let everyone know what's happening here at the Star Lores podcast. Star Lores is now on Discord. If you would like to join the Star Lores Cantina Discord server, you can find a link in the description or on any of our social media accounts. Reach out with a DM or email. We'd love to hear from you. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter by searching the Star Lores podcast. Go ahead and give our page a like and send us a message. You can also email at starlorespodcast@gmail.com. Send us your fan art, Star Wars collections, or fan fictions, and you may even get a feature on one of our pages or even the show. Don't be afraid to offer corrections or add to any of the topics that we discuss on the show. We are also on Patreon, so if you want to help us pay the bills, as well as get a few awesome perks like bonus episodes, access to the private Facebook group, or the VIP section of the Discord server, head on over to patreon.com/starlores and sign up for as little as $1 a month. And finally, make sure to subscribe to us on your favorite podcatcher app or YouTube, as well as sending us a 5-star review on iTunes. This really helps us reach a wider audience. Enjoy the rest of the show.
Welcome aboard the Millennial Falcon. We're coming at you live from the Perlemian trade route once again. I'm Sam.
This is Jordan.
All right, so we're talking about Xenopaleobiology. Just trying to see how many syllables I can ram into one word.
Say it 10 times fast.
I can't do it. I can't do it even once. I wanted to do a xenopaleontology episode, but then when I got into it, I realized that there just wasn't enough content specifically about fossils to do it, which is a first for Star Lores, not finding enough content.
Yeah.
So then if you just zoom out to the level of xenopaleobiology, which is,
you could throw in a bit more in there.
then you can get a bit more, which I didn't even know paleobiology was a thing until I coincidentally was watching a lecture about paleontology.
Okay.
And then they told me about.
So let's give everyone like a working definition of paleobiology. How is it different than typical paleontology?
Well, paleontology's primary form of evidence is fossils, right? Like, that's what it's about. That the word onto or ontology, I think the root of that part refers to bones, and paleo just means old. So paleontology is the study of old bones, essentially. Even though that's kind of a misnomer because most fossils aren't bones anymore, right? All their minerals, or the calcium and all the organic material, has been replaced by other minerals. But close enough. But paleobiology is more about the study of ancient life. And so to do that, you need multiple other lines of evidence. Like you can look at genetic evidence from extant populations and do like molecular clock analyses and see.
Could it be even like actual tissue that, I don't know, has been frozen under the ice for 10,000 years? Could that fall under paleobiology if it's like real tissue?
Yeah, I think so, but it would probably still be a paleontologist who's working on that. Because from what I've heard about paleontology is that sometimes you can get like a little bit of DNA from fossils, and usually I hear that brought up sort of in the context of paleontology.
Sure.
And so paleobiology is just the study of old life, basically extinct life, and so it's studying things like mass extinction events and
Yeah.
speciation. And it's also multidisciplinary because you need to think about like the climate and how that's been changing over time. And there's all sorts of interesting things you can do with that. Like you can sort of clock what temperature the Earth is by looking at fossilized pollen in ice cores brought up from Antarctica.
Yeah.
Because based on the temperature, differing amounts of pollen are deposited. So
Yeah.
that's a big side tangent. But one of the inspirations for this episode, and also the holographic technology episode, was the holographic zoo of extinct animals. It's why I wanted to do the holograms episode and this episode. And in both of them, I didn't even get around to it.
Yeah.
Get around to bringing that up at all. So it appears in, I don't know, a comic book or something. And there's just a big list of interesting animals that we'll get to eventually. The crabex of Mon Calamari, snow falcons of Renal, the manticore.
Man, I'm sorry, but that would just be like a sweet book. Just like an encyclopedia or a codex of some kind, you know?
Of extinct animals?
Yeah, but like Star Wars animals.
Well, I think, yeah, they have that. It's the essential guide to aliens and species.
But I'm talking like more specifically, like species that are no longer in existence.
Oh, the extinct species.
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
that would be cool. The manticore is a fun one because it's like within the Star Wars universe, it's an urban myth, and it's like a half human, half lion or something like that. And now nobody thinks it was a real thing. So I just thought that was funny. It's got a hilarious picture on Wikipedia.
It's like the Bigfoot of Star Wars.
Yeah, exactly. Although I guess Chewbacca is the Bigfoot of Star Wars, but the closest thing. He's a Star Wars cryptid, as they say.
Oh, we're doing a cryptozoology episode.
Oh my
now.
God, xenocryptozoology. It's gonna be huge. The singing trees of Pildiller. That just sounds funny. And the Mantabog of Malastare are among the animals in the holographic zoo of extinct animals. Hopefully sometime.
That's
someday.
that just seems like a cool book.
It's a great plot device.
Yeah.
if nothing else.
For sure.
Also, I just thought in general, the Wikipedia article on bones was funny. I just thought it was funny that they had an article on bones.
Yeah, that's kind of like crazy.
So I couldn't resist
Yeah.
getting into talking about
like
random
what
bones.
separates bones in the Star Wars universe from our universe, and why do we need to know the difference?
I don't know.
Like why is it necessary to have a Wikipedia article?
This brings up an interesting point about Wikipedia in general, though, is that when it first started in like, I think it was somewhere between 2003 and 2006.
Yeah.
It was like one of the very first like non-Wikipedia wikis
Yeah.
that was ever created.
I feel like that, mid 2000s was kind of when wikis started popping up.
Yeah, exactly. And the reason for that is because the Wikipedia articles on Star Wars related topics were just getting so ridiculously like there's just too many of them.
Yeah.
So they're like, just make your own Wookiee.
Yeah,
This is
yeah.
ridiculous. We don't need to know every kind of blaster that's ever been featured in Star Wars, which is wrong. You do need to know that.
Definitely do.
And listen to our show. Sign up to Patreon and you'll find every blaster
Yes.
ever been fired.
We have it in our personal collection.
That's right. And then the idea of this element, hyperbarides, from what planet was that?
Oh, I don't remember.
I can't remember now. I just
One
read
of the first ones we talked about.
and wrote it.
Yeah.
But anyway, that planet, it actually stems from a real life idea of the island of stability in chemistry, I guess. So this predicts that some super heavy element isotopes with specific nuclear structures, like a certain isotope of fluorovium, can be unusually stable. There is evidence to support this hypothesis, but it is not proved since synthesizing the correct isotopes is very difficult, and the exact recipe is still unknown. Some scientists theorize that super heavy elements may occur naturally in fresh supernova remnants. And if you were taking notes during our Stellar Tales episode, you might remember that that is indeed what happens with stars, right? As they progress, they burn heavier and heavier elements and actually create heavier and heavier elements, right? So that is where you get sort of the super heavy things. I don't know. Let me think. So that star system that we talked about, now I'm just going to scroll up and find it now. Now I have to. Goroth Prime.
Right. Yeah.
So Goroth Prime is
like the Garden of Eden or something for the beginning of all life in Star Wars.
Exactly. Well, no, I didn't. It's just the first recorded life.
Yeah, I suppose.
I
feel like it's implied. I've read about it before. I feel like it's implied.
It is implied on some of the Wookiee articles, but I dove deeply into it. So Goroth Prime it was an invention in a source book for some role-playing games.
Okay.
And it was sort of meant to be like an island planet, kind of, that's somewhat separated from the rest of the galaxy.
Yeah.
And they didn't make first contact with the rest of the galaxy till 8000 BBY. There's no mention of them in like Dawn of the Jedi or anything with the Thoyor or anything like that. So I think they were totally isolated from the rest of the galaxy until the Aqualish and the Corellians came and had their war.
Yeah.
And the Aqualish, if you don't know who those are, they're kind of, I don't know how to describe them. They look a little bit like walruses, and they have this strange, like pink sort of butt-looking mouth that you can see them in A New Hope.
Yeah,
the guy who Obi-Wan cuts off an Aqualish's arm.
Right.
That's what they look like. So
they are rather nasty-looking creatures.
Yeah, they I bet they smell like walruses as well, which I hear is not good.
Among other things.
Or maybe just burning flesh.
Yeah.
The Zillo Beast, of course, he appears in the Clone Wars. Kind of looks weird. He has like a strange... They made some strange artistic choices with the model. He has like these really weird flat fingers, which just look odd. I'm not sure what they were thinking there. But that whole story arc is pretty much Godzilla, right?
Yeah.
Like they deploy a super weapon and it wakes up the animal and then it rampages over Coruscant, right? Like, which is like New York. And I think it even does like a King Kong or Godzilla style scaling a building and getting shot down type thing at the end.
Yeah, their average length is 318 feet or 97 meters.
Yeah, they're big boys.
Apparently, they weigh. This can't be right. 60,000 metric tons. Does that seem right? On the Wikipedia article, that's what it says.
I mean, no,
that doesn't. Even looking at the picture of it, it's like
pretty slender.
Yeah, it's not like a girthy animal.
Maybe they're made out of hyperbarite.
Yeah, maybe they just have like this incredibly dense like bone structure.
It's all the hyperbarites inside. Another thing I thought that was funny, just in the bones article on Wikipedia, was that cheekbones also get a subheading in that article. High cheekbones are seen as a sign of female beauty or as a mark of aristocracy. For this reason, aristocratic characters such as Hapens or high-ranking imperial officials are often described as having prominent cheekbones. And of course, there is Grand Moff Tarkin, who's got the most famous cheekbones in the galaxy, I would say.
It's true, yeah.
So maybe that's why they did it, is because sort of set that whole thing up.
Personally, I think the mark of ascended aristocracy is jowls.
That's a very good point.
Like Palpatine or Jabba the Hutt, like some juicy, drippy jowls.
Yeah. You gotta have I feel like Jabba the Hutt's entire body is a jowl.
Basically, yeah.
And then the other coolest thing I found came from another RPG supplement was this Charon species. These like serial murdering, genocidal, maniac spider people from another dimension. They're sort of very Lovecraftian because they're like this degenerate version of an earlier species, and they just want to kill everything with their cult of the void. And then they've also got that biotech, just like the Vong, and this source book like far predates the Yuuzhan Vong novels, so that's interesting. I wonder if they were inspired by it or not, but biotech was like their whole thing. It was pretty much just like the Yuuzhan Vong. And then I also even like the etymology of their name is fun, because there's their precursor species, the Char-onti, right? And then they degenerated into the Charon, which is just a portmanteau of Char and Onti. But then Charon also has some cool mythological tie-ins, because in Greek and Roman mythology, Charon or Charon is a psychopomp, the ferryman of Hades, who carries souls of the newly deceased across the river Styx that divided the world of the living from the world of the dead. And that's from Wikipedia. And then also, Charon is a moon of Pluto, which is cool. Pluto's also another underworld god, and Pluto's in the Oort cloud, right? It's like almost not even in the solar system, so that's sort of why it gets that name. And then Charon, because it's orbiting it, sort of makes sense that it's the ferryman. So that was pretty much my last big beat for the Xenopaleobiology. You got anything else?
Yeah, it's I thought it was a pretty interesting episode. I always think getting into like the creatures of Star Wars is the cryptids of Star Wars.
Cryptids of Star Wars
is always super interesting. It's also just cool to see like people's imaginations and what they think up of in this universe too. So
yeah, I do really highly recommend the Essential Guide to Species. And Creatures. I think that's what it's called.
We got to get all this, man. We got to add it to our collection, our Star Wars collection.
I have read an ebook of it cover to cover from the library.
Yeah. No, I want the hard copy.
Yeah,
though.
Me too. You definitely want a hard copy of that kind of book.
I think one of these days we're going to do we'll do like a Patreon drive or something and give it out as a prize. Give a box set of the Essential Guides.
Oh my goodness. That would be amazing.
Yeah. Anyways, but yeah, that's all I had.
All right. May the forks be with you.